The date is April 7th, 2012. The location is the Yankee Air Museum in Belleville, Michigan. The time is 11:45 a.m. Today, the person being interviewed is Henry Warren Plohr. The interview would be conducted by Leigh Fine and Roy Kellerman, Jr. The interview is being conducted on behalf of the Oral History Project at Yankee Air Museum in Belleville, Michigan. Hello, hi. I'm in the room here with Warren Plohr, and he was a World War II pilot of B-24. And we're here at Yankee Air Museum. And in the room we have Leigh Fine, myself, I'm the interviewer. And we have Roy Kellerman, our videographer. And Warren's wife, Joan, sitting in the back. And so just welcome. Thank you very much for coming to interview with us here. So Warren, I would just ask you a list of questions, and then we'll just go on from there. Okay? Okay, great. So first of all, can you please tell me where you were born and what year?
I was born in New York City
Oh,
in March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 1922.
And your family, what were your parents' occupations?
Say that again?
Your parents' occupation at the time?
Oh, my dad was an engineer. My wife was a homemaker. She took care of me and my sister,
Oh,
who was 10 years younger.
I see.
My baby sister.
What is her name?
Doris.
Doris. And so what job did you have prior to going to the service?
I had an occasional job in the summertime during school, but nothing serious until after the war. And I was employed as a draftsman prior to the war, but that was only a passing fancy. And I had 1 year of schooling at NYU prior to the war, and the war interrupted that.
Mm-hmm. So what age were you when you enlisted?
I was just shy of 21.
Okay. At the time, was there a draft at the time that you were involved in?
Yes, there was.
Did you voluntarily enlist, or was it through the draft that you went through?
What happened was that I had been interested in airplanes and flying all my life. It was triggered by the fact that I was 5 when Charles Lindbergh flew over to Paris. So I was considered to be one of those Lindbergh kids that couldn't get airplanes and pilot flying out of his head. And I wanted to be a pilot for a long time. My dad was an engineer, and he said, no, he says, you don't want to do that. He says, eventually all these people there'll be lots of airplanes around carrying people, and you don't want to be a bus driver. You want to be able to design these airplanes and see them built. So I accepted that, but always wanted to be a pilot in the back of my mind. And we were in Pittsburgh when the war started. And during that following year, it became apparent that they were looking hard for pilots. I think Roosevelt had a request out to Congress to train 50,000 pilots. I think that's the number. And during that year, it became apparent that they were starting recruiting. And by December of '42, I decided to go down to the recruiting station, and they went through a physical test. The most important was eyes, and I had perfect eyesight. That was no problem. But I was kind of thin, skinny. I've always been. And it's changed since. when I went through the test, they found that my 125 pounds and 6-foot frame was not an adequate match, and they turned me down. I thought, well, I can do better than that next time, so I ate a lot of food one week and loaded up on bananas and on that morning and went back down. Well, I don't think I gained much weight, but by shrinking down a little bit, when I stood up, I was no longer 6 foot, I was 5'11", and that made the difference. So I was in. That was December of '42, when I was officially a part of the Air Force, Army Air Force.
I see.
And, but they were not ready to accept all and train all the people. They were not equipped to do the job until March came along, March of '43, and they called a large group of cadets, as the Pittsburgh papers said, is the largest group of cadets ever assembled, and going down to Nashville, Tennessee for initial entry into the Army, into the Air Force. So that's how I got there.
Wow, interesting. So once you enlisted, then where you went down to, where was that again? To,
The first station was a classification center in Nashville, Tennessee.
okay.
It was the unit that tested the entire group of aviation cadets and made a selection of a group to be trained as navigators,
Okay.
another group as bombardiers, and the larger group as pilots. So we all had ambitions, and most of the people were satisfied, I think, with the results. I was very happy to see me on the pilot list.
Yeah, that's great.
And
So as far as adapting to the military life, this is your first time, being in boot camp and things like that. So how was your experience there? At the training, at boot camp and things like that, being in military life, how did you adapt? Was it okay?
Oh.
Was it tough?
well, that was the adaptation to military life as a cadet was entirely different than I perceived the adaptation of infantry. After the classification center, we were sent to a pre-flight school in Maxwell Field, Alabama. And it was more like a college. There was the upperclassmen who had been there for a month or so, and the new class, the lowerclassmen. And like in any college, the upperclassmen had hazing rights over the lowerclassmen.
Of course.
So it was more like being in college than in the Army. It was strange, but we got along. So it was a different adaptation in that respect.
Then how about when did you serve, as far as, what theater?
Oh, that's a long road down the road. I'd like to talk about the training.
Okay, sure.
When I was in classification center, I had come there assuming we were going to have warm weather and military clothes immediately. It turned out not to be the case. This was Nashville, the first place I went to. And I remember being wet and cold and miserable, and the clothes I had, civilian clothes I had brought to throw away when I got there. And they didn't deliver the uniforms very quickly. And so I picked up a cold, and a severe cold. By the time I realized I should have gone on sick leave, I avoided that because I thought I might lose my position in the pilot queue. So I hung on. But when I got to Maxwell Field, Alabama, I did go on sick call because I needed help. And bingo, I was in the hospital for a couple of months. So I lost 2 classes, fell back 2 classes of training, and that affected my entire career in the Air Force. The first place we were sent to was basic primary flying school. And in those days, the primary flying school was operated by civilians. They had found a wonderful group of pilots that were too old for service, but were wonderful for teaching. And I was very lucky to find a wonderful gentleman, probably in his late 30s, early 40s, and he really taught me to fly. I thought I was a problem somewhere along the way, but he stuck it out, and I came out of there. The final exam was a series of aerobatic maneuvers. The training in primary was learning to fly in daylight, and principally to do aerobatic maneuvers so that you could learn how to recover from strange positions of your airplane. And I was fortunate enough to be able to please my instructor with an A on my final aerobatics exam. I went to the next round was basic training. The airplane in primary was a twin-engine biplane.
Oh, so your training wasn't a bomber yet? Oh, I see.
That was a single engine.
Can you pick it up to show for us to the camera?
PT-17.
There we go. Is that you in there?
Yeah. And
Got it, thank you.
the next airplane was a single engine, low wing, basic trainer called the BT-13. Or it was made by Vultee, and because it shook so violently in the spin, they called it the vibrator. But I met another wonderful instructor that I met since the war, and he taught me well. He was a military pilot, second lieutenant, and he taught me well. And then I had a choice of going on to advanced training, and he was trying to talk me into going to single engine school training, but I had decided that I wanted to go to twin engine school. And
what was the reason for twin engine for you?
Good. That's good prompting.
Right.
I had always loved a P-38.
Oh.
And I thought, that's the way to get to P-38s.
There you go, yeah.
But I didn't realize they weren't flying P-38s anymore. They were out of the picture, and there was no need for P-38 pilots.
Wow.
So the multi-engine training ended up with 4 engines.
You got twice as much as you were looking for.
As I said, the training in the primary was basically to learn how to fly during the daylight and get out of odd attitude situations safely. The training in the second category, with the BT-13, was a combination of instrument flying, night flying, and navigation and formation flying. Those were all the things that I really needed to go on, and were very important things. Fortunately, I had a wonderful instructor on those.
What was the toughest part? Was it formation flying at night? Probably sounds like the tough part. Or instrument flying? Which one?
The flying at night was actually more traumatic than flying during the day. And a night solo was real traumatic for me. The instructor I picked, my regular instructor did not train me for night flying, and he did not give me the night solo. Some other officer did, and he did not do well by me in giving me an opportunity to fly. It turned out that I barely handled the stick as a duel with him, and he got out and said, "All right, go fly." And I sat there for a minute and thought, well, if I don't, I'll wash out, so I better go do it. And I did. And when my regular instructor heard what this fellow did, he apparently tore him up and down with his whipped tongue. He was very unhappy with what he did. The other thing about night flying was cross country, and that had another tale. I got them. I got a lot of them. The group was given a task to fly from Bainbridge, Georgia, about 50 miles south, and turn at a beacon, a nightlight, and then fly about 100 miles east to some town, I forget, in Georgia, I think, and then north another 50, and then complete the box and come back. Well, I proceeded down, and I was fortunate that somebody had taught me well about dead reckoning. And I learned that if you plan it well, you can do it. And so I had calculated my times, and I learned to look for the beacon on the first leg early, because if you make the mistake of looking at the time that it's supposed to be there, it's rarely not. Well, the beacon wasn't there, so I turned east and went on around, and I heard some chatter on the intercom, chatter between instructors and students. It was strange what was going on. I didn't understand it. And then I ran out of radio range from them. And by the time I went around the other points, I was heading back, and about 50 miles from the home field, I heard a chatter again. And it was, well, the only one out is Lieutenant Plohr. Where is he? They figured I had been lost. I didn't know why, but as I picked up the mic, I said, I'm coming. And I was really greeted when I landed. What had happened is that a lot of the cadets looked for that beacon,
Right.
and the beacon was out.
Oh, it wasn't even on.
And they went flying straight ahead, and that was the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, near the
So-
water, yeah.
The chatter I heard was the instructor trying to round up this group of people flying around the Gulf of Mexico and dragging them home. And of course, they were really worried that they'd lose somebody and really be hung for it.
Wow, that's interesting.
So that was the first night cross country and night solo
Now, this was in the BT
in the BT 13.
13. Got it, okay.
Advanced training in the twin engine is, I don't remember much about it. We just did some multi-engine out maneuvers and things like that, and did a lot of formation flying and night flying. I don't think there was any problems. I don't remember any strange stories. I don't even remember my instructor's name from that. And in February 44, I graduated. This was, I think, maybe the graduation picture.
Wow.
I don't know, it's something the Army
He was
gave.
handsome, huh? Joe?
And
Oh, by the way, were you married before you went to the service or
No.
after?
that's another story.
Oh, okay.
So,
Now, when you graduated, did you fly the B-24s before you graduated, or was it
No.
only after?
no, after.
Oh,
It was after you graduated that you were assigned to military groups for flying.
So how many hours total does an average graduate have on the plane before they graduate?
Say again?
How many hours do you have to graduate of flying?
I think there were about 250 hours
Okay.
total, something like that. Anyway, you asked about the, how do we get to the B-24?
Right. Because, by the way, Yankee Air Museum is situated
After-
right next to the Willow Run. So that's
After
where we
graduation, I stayed at the Albany, Georgia Twin Engine School for maybe a month because they didn't have a place for me in any military assignment. And I did a little substituting as an instructor. And the only thing I learned about that is that being an instructor is dangerous.
Were the students trying to crash a plane? You're trying to save it?
But I survived
Okay.
and was glad to get out of there because it didn't look like a good thing to be doing. They sent me to a B-24 group school. Why can't I think of that? It was in Massachusetts. And when I arrived, I found that I was assigned as co-pilot to a crew. And that was really the crew that most of my flying in the B-24 was about. The task at that field, Westover Field, Massachusetts, the pilot, the commander-in-chief, the command pilot, had been to B-24 school. He had graduated a couple months before me, which was where I would have been had I not been sick.
Right, the cold.
So that's how the catching a cold changed it.
Got it.
His name was Paul, and he was a wonderful fellow. And the rest of the crew members, there was the first pilot, the co-pilot, me, a navigator, no bombardier, a navigator, I said that, and a radio man, and 1, 2, 3, 4 gunners, one of which was a crew chief, mechanical crew chief. He was the important crew member because he helped us keep the airplane going. Sure. And we trained at Westover. My task mainly was learn how to fly the B-24, which was what Paul taught me. Right. And then we got our first assignment, which was not overseas. We were assigned to Langley Field, Virginia. And the task there was that we would fly radar bombers, radar-equipped B-24s with bombardiers, radar bombardiers, training them. So we actually was the vehicle for ferrying these these trainees up to altitude. We turned it on autopilot, and they would take it and fly up and down the coast. The crew had little to do. The navigator was the most busy one, trying to make sure that if the radar guy got lost, he could get us home. And
like the model that you flew was the B-24J, right?
At that time, it was a J,
okay.
yeah. These were the ones that were coming off the production line with radar equipment. And we flew actually various ones that were available until one day we were requested to go to Willow Run and pick up a new one.
Which is where Yankee Air Museum is at. Yeah, we're right here.
So the four of us, Paul the pilot, me the co-pilot, the navigator, and the crew chief. I'm not sure about the radio man. We're ferried up to Willow Run. We picked up one off the line, and first thing I did was steal this off the pilot's console. It says, Consolidated Vultee Ford. So that's the original one from the bomber that we picked up. we flew that back to Virginia and trained one particular bombardier for a period of time, maybe weeks. And then we were assigned to go overseas with that bomber and the 10-man crew, including the bombardier. When I picked up the bomber at Willow Run, they gave me a piece of paper and said, "Please sign here." I looked at it, it was the invoice for the bomber. And I looked at the price, I think $55,000. And I said, "Am I responsible for that?" Oh, well.
Wait,
I signed.
what was your pay back then as an officer?
A couple hundred a month.
100 a month,
As
like
a,
1,000. It's only 55 years. You gotta
An officer. Yeah, it was good pay. All right, back to
Went to Europe.
going overseas. We were asked to go the northern route. And the first leg of the northern route was between Langley Field, Virginia, and Bangor, Maine. We flew that, and this gave the crew chief a chance to check some things out. And when we got to Maine for an overnight stay, Bangor, crew chief Buckles, Worley Buckles, a great guy from Tennessee. He said, "Lieutenant Plohr," he says, "I wasn't able to transfer fuel from the wingtip tanks. I'm going to stay with this airplane and find out why not." So he I don't know how late he stayed, but the next morning I came out and said, "Well, Buck, what did you find?" He says, "I found a valve that they didn't tell us about. It wasn't in the other airplanes that we flew. It was a newly added valve." And he says, "I'll check and make sure we can transfer fuel on the next leg."
Oh, yeah.
And that happened. The next leg was from Bangor to Gander, Newfoundland. And we stayed in Newfoundland for a few days because the next leg was from there to Iceland, Reykjavik. And it was a long trip. At that time, there were no radio aids that could provide navigation, not at that distance. The only thing we had was dead reckoning, which meant you flew time and course.
Right.
And the course is on the magnetic compass that you have in the airplane, and the time is by watch. The one thing that you didn't know were winds,
Oh, right. Direction of the wind, yeah.
but they gave us predicted winds, and they were right on target as far as I know.
Wow.
They were, that wasn't a day when you had satellite observations,
Right.
and getting winds over the ocean was a matter.
Did you go as a group, as a squadron, or did you go?
No,
as
solo.
Solo? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we went one at a time.
Wow. What altitude were you flying at?
11,000.
Oh, that's right. It has to be breathable air at that time. Well, actually, no. That's right. Breathable air is at 11,000, right? But you can fly higher, but you have to wear oxygen masks, right? If that's the case.
It wasn't so much that. It was, we didn't fly, we didn't use oxygen at 11,000.
Sure.
You were supposed to put it on at above 10,000, but
Oh, got it.
11,000 we didn't. The reason they chose 11,000 because of the winds and other things. And it turns out to be an important number because the course took us past the tip of Greenland, and the mountains in the tip of Greenland are 11,000 feet high.
Oh.
So you had to make sure you missed Greenland.
Right, literally.
And
The tip of Greenland.
if everything was, if you flew right, you should be able to do that. However, we were chunking along towards Greenland, and I was checking the instruments. We had been flying with a, following the course with a remote sensing magnetic compass. Mm-hmm. It was something out in the wing, and it was a newfangled gadget with electronic connections to provide that. It was a nice thing to follow because it didn't bobble around. It was a big dial, so it was more convenient. But I checked it against this little bobbling magnetic compass that is in all primary instruments. It's nothing more than a magnetic and a floating ball. And they were 90 degrees off.
Whoops.
I called Paul, look. And he said, well, we know which one to follow. So we followed the little
The
one.
ball, okay.
And then he began to worry about whether we had drifted too much in towards Greenland. So he elected, like any good pilot, command pilot did, to take a 50-mile dogleg around. So we added another 100 miles to the trip, which was not a problem, but
Right.
that was the first problem we encountered. When we got near, I don't know, maybe 100 miles from Reykjavik, which was in
Iceland.
the landings field. I tuned in to the only radio navigation aid we had, which was a long-range ANN signal. And that indicated we were right on course. But the beam is so wide at that point in time, it's practically meaningless. But it turned out that on course thing and was right, and we flew right into Reykjavik, landed,
Excellent.
had some K rations for dinner.
That's what you have on the plane too, right?
What?
While you're flying, you were eating K rations also on the plane?
We didn't eat. Maybe a chocolate bar or something like that.
Really?
I don't remember eating or peeing.
Oh my gosh, that's right. What do you do? There's no toilets on that thing, is there?
No. You're young, you can hold it.
Wait a minute, how many hours was that?
So, we landed at Reykjavik and took off on the last leg towards the UK. Our destination was Ireland. We landed in Ireland. And at that point in time, they took the airplane away from us and the bombardier. And so the 9 of us, as the original crew, was the one that was sent to the bomb group in England. It turned out to be the 489th bomb group. important to understand how these groups worked out of England. If you look at England and look at the west coast, no, east coast, the coast nearest Europe.
Yep.
There's a little jut of land that sticks out called East Anglia. And it was there that along that coast, all the airfields were. There were not only American airfields, but British airfields. And a little back calculating, there must have been 100 4-engine bomber fields.
Wow.
And fighter fields and British fields. And so it was on a day when there were bombing raids. It was a hornet's nest up there. Fortunately, the British did it at night only, and we would do it during the day for bombing, and the fighters would support both. But consider the logistics of getting hundreds, as much as 1,000 airplanes into the air from 30 flying fields, form and fly to Europe. It turns out that they had worked those logistics out very well. And what happened was that each group went by itself to form. It took off from our field on 1-minute intervals at let me go back. They go on 1-minute intervals, and above the clouds at a certain altitude, predefined altitude, they'd assemble with an assembly ship. And that's a typical assembly ship. It's brightly colored. This wasn't ours. Ours was called Cookie and was a brown B-24 with yellow dots all over it.
Oh. So it really had to stand out so you could see it.
Yeah, that was very important to do. So you'd get up above the clouds, and the question always was, how could you go fly through those clouds without hitting one another? Only by timing. Everybody climbed at the same rate, 1 minute apart. You went in the same circle.
That's interesting. Hopefully nobody's off by a minute.
I don't remember that we ever had any mid-airs during launch and assembly. That's not true for the rest of the flight, so. Once we assembled, then there was a time where the leader took us off on the course to Europe, and the other squadrons that were, the other groups from other airfields would end up with their assignment behind us or ahead of us. And there was once, I remember that there were 1,000 airplanes, 1,000 4-engine bombers, mostly B-17s.
Okay.
B-17 was a favorite airplane over there rather than the B-24. And
what was the reason for that?
say again?
Why was the B-17 the favorite?
It flew higher,
Okay.
and while this one flew a little faster, it flew lower. I don't know. That was the basic reason. It was The B-24 had a longer range capability, which was more adaptable and usable in the Pacific.
Right.
So the B-17 wasn't favored in the Pacific, but the 24 was. Anyway, I remember we, on this 1,000th day where there was a 1,000 plane raid, we were early in the group going over. On the way over, we could see nothing but clear skies. And after we dropped our bombs, turned around, and we saw these airplanes coming, thousands of them. All the way back, we got back to England, they were still coming.
Oh my gosh.
What a logistics problem was very well handled, and was surprising that we were able to do that.
Yeah, that is amazing.
The day came when we go on a mission, somebody would come around and wake us up about 3 in the morning, and we'd go eat breakfast, which was, I remember, powdered eggs, powdered milk, and sometimes fried oysters.
Oysters?
I don't know why.
Huh.
It wasn't a very good meal,
Yeah.
but it was enough to do you for the rest for the morning today. Then we go to a briefing room, and this is a briefing sheet, one that was handed out with a Xerox of actual sheet, and it's has the names of the pilots and the different. These are 3 different squadrons, and let's see. Here's the one that we were flying. It was a lower left. And the other information they put down here was all things like taxi time, takeoff time, runway, reference altitude to keep it secret. Assembly altitude was that's where we assembled. That was 14,000 feet that day, or 3,000 feet on top of the overcast.
Oh, I see. So you see each other.
And you leave the base at 7:47 in the morning at 1,400 feet. Fuel load 25,000 gallons, 25,000 gallons. Bomb load 6 1,000 pounders. Target time 9:30. Bomb altitude 25,000.
So you flew higher. The reason why you flew higher was to avoid the flak? Is that the reason why?
Yeah. Visibility, code words. And communication links, fighter calls, and leader names, all coded. That's what I copied down at the briefing, and I was responsible for that. That was my task. So I have one of these for each time we attempted to fly, not only for missions that we completed, but missions aborted. We had a few of those.
So how many missions did you have to fly before, you got out?
At that time, it was 35 missions,
Okay.
and I did not do that, and I'll tell you why later in my story.
Sure.
I picked this one at random out of the sheets I had. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's not one of the better missions we ran. It was my second mission, and it was okay. When I got back, I'd keep some kind of a diary, usually filling in this page. Let me read it and then explain. Number 2 for me, also number 2 to Kassel, Germany. Formation was a scare today. Number 1 scare, while assembling at the wing assembly point. That's where the other ones, our groups would merge with other groups. We ran into another group and scattered all over the sky. Number 2 scare was over the target. After bombs away, the high right squadron peeled off into our leader. We nearly collided with the right-wing ship of our element. The flak, which is the anti-aircraft, wasn't too bad today. And we saw a few rockets. It turned out to be, those were the Me-163s.
The rocket fighters?
What they do, they shoot up past the formations and glide up there and radio information as to where we were, how the flak was attacking us. So that's the way they use those. I didn't realize that until later.
Interesting.
I didn't know what they were. We call them rockets.
Yeah.
They were rockets,
Right.
rocket propelled.
Yeah.
Oh, we had to call the flak accurate because we got a hole in number 3 engine cowl.
Wow.
Everything was pretty good except for the formation until we circled for a landing. We lost 2 aircraft in a puff of smoke. I couldn't eat my dinner after that. Another nearly ditched but made Woodbridge on his own. Bombing was radar at 24,000 feet. Bert, one of the crew members, passed out from a frozen oxygen mask. Not so funny today. P.S. The 445th had it. It lost 33 out of 40 aircraft.
Wow.
Let me explain some things. When we returned in formation. We were flying over England at a few thousand feet. And the formation was kind of sloppy. Everybody was tired. Why hold the formation tight? And our leader said, "Come on, let's show the colonel how good we are. Sack it in there and get in formation." Well, it was a bumpy summer day. Airplanes were bouncing around from the thermals at 2,000 feet. And I watched this airplane below me, and he was having trouble trying to maintain his position. And he slid right into the leader of that formation, and the two of them went down. And I didn't hear the leader call for better formation anymore. It was too bad. And the fact that the 445th lost 33 out of 40 was an indication of fighter activity. At that point, the Germans didn't have many fighters left, but they concentrated a group of fighters and concentrated on one flying squadron, and just goes through the squadron, and that was why they lost 33 airplanes. So that was enemy fire. So that's just a taste of what it is. This is a picture of my Paul, the pilot, in front of a B-24 wheel.
Yep.
And this was a picture of my navigator and I before we went over. The unfortunate situation was that our crew was split up. They started not calling us as a group with Paul as the pilot. They'd call me as substitute co-pilot. They'd call some of the gunners and crew chiefs. And my navigator got called up, and he was shot down. He was lost. That's this fellow. His name was Marion, or Red Pfeiffer. He was a good friend, but we lost him. He was the only one on the crew that got lost. Was lost over there. What happened after about 7 missions, I think I had 3 with Paul and 4 with other crews. So I was well known as a substitute.
Did you guys fly plane 50-50%? Like Paul would fly there, you would fly back, or how were the hours divided for flying?
It depended on the pilot.
Okay.
Paul, when I flew with him, his legs would get tired. 24 was hard on the legs because it was tough pushing. And his legs pained him at altitude, so I'd get to fly most of the way. And that depended on which pilot I was with. Usually it was a reason for relief. It was hard to fly the whole way. So the thing that happened was let's see, we got there, joined the 489th in, I think it was September. And came November, we got a call to stand down. The whole group got a call to stand down. And we learned that our group had been chosen to go to the Pacific. And as a first group to do so, it was kind of like a test group. Well, everybody, every pilot and every crew was too much. So they selected certain crews to go back and certain crews to stay. Since I was kind of detached from any crew, I was asked by one crew, the scavenger that I had flown with, to be his co-pilot because his co-pilot wanted to stay and complete his missions there. He didn't want to get to the Far East and start all over again, and he only had a few missions to go. So I joined that group, that's the crew, and went back with that crew. We, in December, we left on the Marine Robin, which was a boat, a ship, a vessel, and it took 10 days to go from the UK to Boston Harbor. And it was quite an adventure. The Marine Robin bobbled around in the ocean like a cork, and most of the people were sick, but I was kind of immune to seasickness and was able to enjoy all the good food that nobody else wanted. The other thing I remember is that cigarettes were 50 cents a carton, and you could buy one carton a day. So I bought a bunch of cartons back and put them in my bag and handed them out when I got home to all the girls.
The girls smoke?
Not Joan. No, I hadn't met her yet.
I see. But you didn't smoke yourself?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. And I quit a few years later. So we got home. And we were told that we had 30 days leave.
Wow.
So I went back to Pittsburgh for 30 days. It was good that I was able to, because while I was training in B-24, I got a call from the office and told that my dad was ill, and they were giving me leave to go home. It turned out that my dad had died. So my sister and my mother were alone. Sister was 10 years younger than I. She was still in school. And mother wasn't working. So it was good I was able to come home for that Christmas.
How did your dad pass away? How did he die?
Heart attack in
How
the
old?
summer.
How old was he at the time?
In his early 50s. Anyway, after Christmas and New Year holidays, we were ordered to go to Kansas. And we got on a train and headed for Kansas. And on the way, the orders got changed. We didn't know why, but we were ordered to go to Tucson, Arizona. It turned out that they had decided that they were not going to send us over to in the Pacific in B-24s, but B-29s.
Oh, the newer bomber.
And B-29s was a training place at Tucson at Davis-Monthan Airfield. We arrived there, and The crew I had joined was not one of the crews that they needed. They had to reduce the number of crews for a B-29 group. So I was again on the loose. I was assigned to field duty, and I got my chance to fly a B-17 with nothing else, no more B-24s. And I found the B-17 to be hard to land because it had such a big wing area, it would float like a kite. Whereas the B-24, you'd dive at the target and pull up with flaps and boom, you were down. And I could never get used to landing that. I didn't know why people liked it so much. But, so I stayed with the Davis-Monthan field and did my service in flying there until the war ended. And in August, September, right after the war, there was a bulletin board that said all those that have their own transportation can get out of the service to go home.
Okay.
So I immediately signed up. What was my transportation?
You're going to find one.
I went to the field and hitched a ride on a Navy airplane going towards Texas.
Oh, there you go.
He dragged me as far as he could into Texas and finally stopped at some place to see his girlfriend. So I figured it was time to part company, and I bought a ticket on a train and went home.
Home to
It was
Pittsburgh, right?
Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
It was September.
Of 1945.
And I realized that at that point, school was starting. And I had 1 year in, but there was Carnegie Tech at Pittsburgh. I marched down there and they welcomed me because they didn't have any men, but they had a lot of girls. One of them was sitting right over there.
Ah.
So that took me back to civilian life.
So what was your reception like when you got out of the war? What were the civilians? How did they treat you?
I don't really remember any reception except my mom and daughter and sister.
Okay.
Welcome home.
Okay.
I don't remember any big parades or anything. Nothing.
I see. So tell us, how did you meet Joan then? Obviously at the college.
Oh, at Carnegie.
Yep. So how did you meet her?
In the beanery, the cafeteria.
Cafeteria. Okay.
Yeah, I remember walking down the beanery carrying a load of books. Oh, can I help you carry your books?
Wait, she asked you?
No.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got it.
I wore my uniform
Okay.
for a short time with my jacket. Joan is prompting me about something.
You had your bomber
Oh.
jacket.
Yeah. She liked my leather bomber jacket, which I dearly loved, but it got stored in a wrong place in the basement and got moldy and got thrown away. I missed it.
So how long did you meet Joan before you guys got married?
Say again?
How long did it take before you married Joan?
Let's see.
49.
We graduated in 47, and I married her in 49. And we've been together ever since. We have 3 lovely children, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 grandchildren, 3 of which here are in Ann Arbor. One in Maine with my son, who's a vet, and 2 in Los Alamos with my son, who's a mathematician, and his wife is too. And my daughter is the one that's in Ann Arbor here. She's an artist, and it has 3 of the oldest that are still going to college for their, one for a doctor of
Dentistry.
psychiatry.
Dentistry.
Dentistry.
Oh, and the other one for dentistry. And the third one is probably going to go to become a vet, like my youngest son.
By the way, when you went to college, what did you study, and then what type of work did you do after that?
I studied aeronautical engineering.
Ah, interesting.
And after I went to work for NACA.
Which is before NASA.
That was the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which eventually became NASA. And that's where I stayed until I retired. When I first graduated, the work I did was on turbojet engines, because it was an engine research facility, no airplanes. And then once it became NASA, it became a rocket research. And so I got into that. I guess my official title was research engineer, research scientist, rockets, which my son says, puts that the other way. You're a rocket scientist. Whatever that means.
Did you meet anybody famous when you were working at NASA? Like maybe Von Braun or anybody like that?
Did I what?
Do you meet anybody famous at NASA when you worked there?
I guess I...
Shepard.
Shepard? Oh, the astronaut?
Oh.
You met Alan Shepard?
Yeah. I was at the launch site launching a rocket that carried a test capsule for the Mercury program.
Wow.
And this fellow I knew was escorting the new astronauts around. Alan Shepard was one of them. So I had him sign the countdown sheet. But that's all. I guess he was the only one I really met, which was a fleeting.
Sure. So after you retired, what hobbies did you pursue?
You very well know that I was still interested in airplanes, and I got back into model airplanes, and because at that time the radio control was an early venture and new adventure, I found myself interested in the electronics of that. I got my amateur radio license and studied electronics. Out of the handbook, the amateur handbook, but also from school. I took a couple of courses out of the Toledo University on electronics. And electronics became a secondary and primary interest in addition to aeronautics. And
Like a couple of years ago, I remember, because we fly in the same radio control club, and I've known Warren since 2001, since I moved to Michigan, and he actually received an award. He's actually indoctrinated into the Hall of Fame for the American, was it AMA, American Modelers Association, or someone, model airplanes. And can you tell us a little bit about the award that you got?
I had developed an interest to do things for the national organization that was the Academy of Model Aeronautics. I knew one of the real old timers of radio control, Walt Good. And he asked me one day if I would be interested in joining a committee that kind of guided the radio control electronics and for the AMA. It was called the Frequency Committee. And I worked on that for many years. It was primarily my contributions to that committee over the years that caused them to first give me an award as an AMA fellow, and then as a member of the Hall of Fame, AMA Hall of Fame. That was the most recent one.
Yep.
So it was an award for working that committee over the years. And doing that committee work was very interesting because I met some very interesting and intelligent people that piqued my interest in electronics and radio control.
Interesting. Great.
Yeah. So looking back on your military career, is there like a day or event or anything that really stands out that you always said you'd never forget, or?
I guess the day I'll never forget is the one I mentioned here. When there was a mid-air coming home. I can still see that. It's well ingrained in my memory. It's a good point.
Anything else?
I'm clapping.
I think that's good.
Okay, great. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention the date. Today is April 7th, 2012. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for coming in, Warren.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really would like to dedicate.
Yes, on.
I really would like to dedicate this information to the crew members that I flew with. They were a wonderful group of people. And after the war, we did correspond and sometimes get together with some of us. All have since died except the nose gunner. And he and I are still in contact.
Where is he living right now?
He lives in Tennessee. Wally. So. They were a great group. God bless them.
You know, just doing the interview, I just really, I'm sure Roy agrees too. We really appreciate the sacrifice that you've put
You're very welcome.
and for our country, and just the things we've gone through, just for the sake of giving us, America.
I have a question from my son-in-law. He wondered how he could view this tape and other tapes like it.
Yep.
So I'd like to know that when you get a chance.
Yep. Sure will.
Okay.
Great.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you very much. All right.
Okay.